Well, two things. One, when Anthony Fauci was introduced as unassailable, my career in politics has taught me, and I'm a from a theo nerd standpoint, I'm a total depravity kind of guy. So when I was introduced to Mr. Unassailable, my spidey sense started tingling right away. I don't believe anybody's unassailable, and always be the most concerned about whoever in the room that you're being told is unassailable. Nobody tiptoes between the raindrops. Nobody doesn't have the stain of human nature on them somewhere. That was number one. But number two, guys, I just started doing the math on data we were getting out of Italy, for example. Didn't really count any of the data from China, any of its data at all, because I just think they lie. And I seeing some of the countries that were early exposed to this, like Taiwan and South Korea, how they behaved compared to how we were behaving, and the math just didn't add up. And I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a physician, I'm not an immunologist, I'm not a virologist, I'm a BSologist. And one thing I do is research data and then analyze it, and then reverse analyze it to see if the original analysis has integrity. Because philosophy is a science like any other, and one of the laws of philosophy is for one side's assertion to be true, the other side must be true as well. The reverse has to be true, otherwise we have what's called a fallacy. And so from the very beginning, the math didn't add up. For example, how do you do 15 days to flatten a curve if you don't know when a curve began? I mean, when did this virus arrive? We were all showed these in late February and early March. We were all showed these alarmist escalator charts. No cases, no cases. Now this huge spike. Well, what date did the virus arrive? And now we've got serology exams from Ohio, from Northern California that shows it was here at least into early January. So a good 4 to 6 weeks before this was on anybody's radar whatsoever. And if you guys will indulge me for a second, I just posted some data as of 5 o'clock Eastern today. So close of business today. You guys mind if I share some of this with your audience? Because I think they'd be
absolutely. Please, Steve.
All right. So percentage of Americans in nursing homes that were killed by coronavirus. 36% of America's nursing home residents have sadly died. 43% of all deaths in America from coronavirus were in nursing homes, where 0.6% of the population lives, which means the percentage of Americans not in nursing homes killed by coronavirus, 0.03%. 0.03. Percentage of Americans to ever test positive for coronavirus, 1.5%. Percentage of Americans who currently are positive for coronavirus, 0.7%. Percentage of Americans not in New York or New Jersey who have died of coronavirus, 0.03%. Total number of states with fewer than 1,000 coronavirus deaths, 24. Total coronavirus deaths in Arizona, Texas, Florida, and Georgia, those 4 red states the media is crushing, 22,667. Total coronavirus deaths in New York, which the media praises, 32,798. And those 4 red states have almost 4 times the population of New York. Number of the 10 deadliest coronavirus states that have mask mandates, 8. Number of the 10 least deadliest coronavirus states that have mask mandates, or that do not have mask mandates, 5. Where blue states, New York and New Jersey, would rank in deaths in the world, if they were their own state, deaths by 1 million population, they would be the worst country in the world for deaths by 1 million population. Where red states, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, and Texas would rank in that stat, 13th, despite the fact they have 4 times the population of New York and New Jersey. U.S. deaths by 1 million population, if you include New York and New Jersey, 483. If you take them away, it drops to 358. European countries with worse coronavirus mortality than the U.S. if you subtract New York and New Jersey, Belgium, UK, Spain, Italy, Sweden, France, and Netherlands. You can look at all those stats, and I think audiences like yours need to ask themselves a simple question. Given those actual numbers, was this worth losing 1/3 of our GDP, leaving our loved ones to die alone, not treating any other sickness in this country for months? And now you're seeing, even the New York Times is talking now about the suicides, the drug addictions, the depressions and everything else, making our children wear diapers on their faces. That Hong Kong, 81% mask usage, 3rd wave of lockdowns. Philippines, 91% mask usage, 2nd wave of lockdowns. All right. I mean, was anything that we've endured for the last 5 months worth it given the numbers I just cited, when we're supposedly in the middle of when it's the worst it's ever been,
Mm-hmm.
I think most people that are thinking with their brains would say no.
Right. That's astounding. Those numbers are just, I'm processing them right now. And I cannot believe that we're in the situation that we're in, considering what we know now. And the CDC director recently came out and said that it looks like that drug overdoses and suicides are now spiking and have surpassed COVID-19 deaths. Um, so there's also reports too, I was just reading about domestic abuse rates being higher, and the UN now says that lockdowns have put hundreds of millions of people in developing countries at risk of starvation, not to mention the 30 million Americans that are facing unemployment. So I would love to hear from you, your thoughts on why didn't politicians and bureaucrats consider some of those possible, I mean, we say unintended consequences, but in reality, they're predictable consequences as a result of staying locked indoors.
It's the $1 million question. And when I get to heaven, one of the things I'm going to ask Jesus that I have to know, I won't be able to rest in peace until I know why in the Sam Hill Donald Trump surrendered his presidency to Anthony Fauci and Debbie Birx for 5 months, and the IHME model and everything else. And I think, Hannah, there's 3 possible answers. I think everybody that you're asking about fits into one of 3 categories. I think that you want to give some mercy, some grace, some benefit of the doubt. This was a novel coronavirus. Now, coronaviruses are not novel. Almost everybody watching this has had one. It's called a cold in many cases. Coronaviruses, we've been dealing with them for 6 to 7 decades. But this one was different in that it mutated from animal to animal and then animal to human. We had not seen that yet from a coronavirus. So I think there was some legitimate fear of what exactly was it. Captain Trips, we don't know. We know we can't trust China. The WHO was on Twitter in January tweeting out there's no human-to-human transmission of COVID-19. So that was obviously not true. So we were hit with something, blindsided with it, without really any reliable data outside of Italy. And Italy's healthcare system was brought to its knees because it didn't have 5,000 extra ICU beds. I don't understand how a modern Western country of 60 million people couldn't handle another 5,000 ICU beds, but that's literally what brought Italy's healthcare system to its knees. So some of this was we were caught flat-footed by something from nature we had not seen, or maybe a Chinese lab that we had not seen before. That's part of it. The second part of it is that, it's the Rahm Emanuel School of Government. Never let a good crisis go to waste. We're sitting here in an election year with a president who has presided over the best economic growth we've had since the dot-com boom 20 years ago. And you've already tried an impeachment. You've already tried a $40 million independent counsel that came up with, he didn't do anything that we accused him of. So we're kind of running out of options here. So I don't know, maybe we can get him to crush his economy and see if he'll stupidly go along with it. I think that's option 2. And then the third option is something we don't talk about a lot, but it's a worldview option. We have seen science in our culture in our day and age morph into what I like to call scientism. And I think a good example of this is in the movie The Martian, when Matt Damon says, I'm going to science the bleep out of this. Like I can just make stuff up, it's like the Green Lantern power ring. It can construct things. If my mind just wills it, I can conjure truth. I can conjure outcomes. There's a pill for everything, even though the disclaimer is longer than the actual ad when you watch the 30-second spot. There's a device for everything. That somehow we humans, this is the progressive worldview, that we be like God. We are just constantly building little towers of Babel, and we can constantly bring the world to our knees, that we don't have to admit and accept that there's some things in this world beyond us. The death rate's going to be 100%, and all we have is what we can do with the time that we actually have. And I think that's where we went right from there's 57 genders to, wow, we can control a virus. And no, you can't, especially that's a respiratory virus. Why? Because we all have to breathe. At some point, we're going to all have to breathe. So this idea that we could just, isolate the healthy, so we're not getting to herd immunity. We're taking all the healthy immune systems off of the board. And now we wondered when we locked all these healthy people down, we let them back out again. Of course, they were going to get reinfected. They were going to get infected because they hadn't been infected the first time. It's actually good news that the virus is running into the younger immune systems now. In my home state of Iowa, the average age of a new case, guys, is 22 years old. That's what we want. We want to see the virus go up against 22-year-olds, not the 82-year-olds in our nursing homes that it just absolutely decimated. All right. And so that's what Sweden did. Sweden practiced good old fashioned science without a vaccine. And now you see where their curve is at compared to ours. And so this scientism notion, this idea that there are perfect outcomes, perfect solutions, utopian ideas, we're just going to hide out for a vaccine. Remember, we heard that in March and April. Folks, we've been trying 70 years to get a coronavirus vaccine. We've never been able to come up with one. The flu vaccine, depending on the strain where you live, fails 20 to 50% of the time every single flu season. So this idea, they tried for 12 years to get a vaccine to the first SARS and they gave up. They never could make it happen. So this idea that we were just going to put the economy on pause, like you can just do that with people's lives, no proms, no marriages, no weddings, no graduations, the stuff that actually makes life worth living, that are benchmarks that we measure the time we have on earth by, right? Nobody's tombstone says survived 81 years. Their tombstone says loving mother, loving father, loving husband, loving wife, loving daughter, son. Those relationships, benchmarks, we put all those on hold, okay, so that we could concoct a perfect scenario and it could never happen. And I think, yes, we have the politicians that want to take advantage of this on the left. Yes, we have the politicians like the president that have mismanaged this terribly. But I think what's driving this culturally, the Karen phenomenon and other things you see, is this worldview that we don't have to really, that we are the highest being here, that there's nothing higher than us that we have to be accountable to, that we are masters of our own fate. Mm-hmm. And that, I think it's fascinating. Every time we try a mitigation strategy, it fails. Social distancing failed, the masks fail. Everything we try, other than just good old-fashioned science, fails.